my message to people coming on board vis-à-vis Resource Discovery Task Force work and opening up their data and building services is that this has to be and should be valuable to their larger mission in terms of surviving and thriving in the 2010s and beyond.
It's invaluable. We can never do what we would like to do with our data in the way that we want to do it. There's just not enough time and man hours in the world and not enough staff. So doing this and making ourselves open to collaboration and allowing our content to be used in wider resources is just perfect.
I think one of the exciting things about today is that we have really been discussing, probably for the first time, cross-domain developments together in a room. Previously, there's been an awful lot of siloed questions about what to do with library data, what to do with museums and museum audiences, what to do with archive data. And actually here we're beginning to see breaking down of barriers between those sectors and those professionals, and bringing together some of those different methodologies as well, which I find quite challenging but useful in my own team, and you can see that replicated in the sector.
I think the key thing for us is that in a time where our resources are constrained in terms of the services we can offer, opening up your data really allows others to come in and sort of innovate almost on your behalf, or also to get the things they want to get out of your data without having to go through all the sort of the politics and the faff of having to ask you and convince you of the business case. There are enough talented, clever people out there at all levels, whether that's a first-year undergraduate of a university, or it's someone at MIMAS, or it's someone on the other side of the world, who are able to sort of, use data as it's published on the web, use open data, and use that to do really interesting, sort of exciting things.
I put the customer at the middle, because it doesn't matter whether it's a member of the public or a consultant surgeon or an academic researcher. Quite frankly, they simply want the stuff, and they don't want to have to search across 6 different databases, and they want to know exactly what we've got. So it's very, very challenging. And we've made a lot of progress, especially in the last decade, but there's an awful lot more to go.
Yeah, I'm really interested in the mapping of it doesn't matter so much how we catalogue our collections in-house, so long as we know about all the different standards that other sectors use, that we can map to them. And then it's really learning the technology so that we can do that easily, and that things can be harvested automatically, so that we're not labour intensively handling individual sets and having to map them. So yeah, the open linked data approach is a really useful technology, and I think in a way we're waiting for the technology to catch up. We've been preparing for it a long time, the way that we catalogue our information, and we're ready to put it out there and get people to find it.
There's this larger cultural value of the open access agenda, in that the general public is now seeing maybe for the first time the results of their public taxes, which have been subsidising and in some cases fully paying for a lot of the research that's gone on. I think open data as well has a larger cultural part to play, just in the way that museums can open up their collections. So this is moving away now from pure research into just our cultural heritage. I used to be a museum curator myself on Hadrian's Wall, and I know that it would have been very useful indeed. It's something that I was trying to work towards then, to actually free up the amount of information that's just locked up in that museum, which a typical visitor is never going to see. They're going to come along to a museum and say maybe 200 or 300 articles, without being aware that there are hundreds of thousands of records of individual articles, of finds, of plans, of sections, of excavation reports, which have all been done largely with their money, and which is their own cultural heritage, and which they should surely have access to. And I think it's only now that this larger open access agenda is percolating throughout a lot of different realms that promise is now coming to fulfilment.
I think it's a great idea. I think anything that can drive forward research and just people using material that they've either paid for as a taxpayer or just have an interest in, the more people can get to that data and actually make their own discoveries by looking at the sort of source material, the better, and it'll probably sort of speed research as well.
Quite often assets are made available to university students and to scholars and to academics. And yet there doesn't seem to be an acceptance of the idea that once people leave academia and go into the workplace, where quite often there is quite a research requirement of them, they're then locked out quite often from those research resources. And so in terms of enriching industry in all areas of our culture, in my own area of performing arts companies and the work that they do, that I think it can only be of benefit to the population as a whole and to the advancement of society in the UK to have rich resources and make them equally available to everybody.
I see this as phase 2 of the opening up of our collections. 10 years ago we moved from a collection of word processed catalogues and published catalogues to an online database, and that in itself opened up material a good deal and democratised the process. Prior to that, we'd been able to draw up sources guides for the predictable questions. What do you have on shell shock? What do you have on AIDS? And so forth. And in general, we tended to point people at predictable sources for those things, the things that we ourselves knew about. We couldn't actually answer the question if somebody came with something unpredictable, something strange or even silly, as we might see it. If somebody came and said, what do you have on Marmite? The answer was, we do not know. Now, with an online database, somebody can simply type Marmite into the search box and find that, yeah, we do have 10 or so files scattered about the collection in the papers of different nutritionists, and that in itself has been a huge leap forwards. But they still have to come to our database. They still have to know that there is likely to be material in the Wellcome Library for their quest. And as I said earlier on, our holdings are immensely varied. There are things there that you would not expect. This linking of data is, we would see it, a way of enabling people to stumble across these things that they don't realise are there in our collections, so that if, for example, people are particularly interested in drawing up a set of data on what is there out there on Marmite or other vitamin B related products, they can do that and guide people through to the Wellcome Library without our having to go out and seek them.
I'm a big advocate of the just do it, but I think it's not a matter of just doing it, it's publish the data under an agreed and accepted license and then see what happens.
My kind of preference is to get the data out there. I think if it is useful data, people will use it.
It's clearly crucial that we do have some sort of critical mass that gets the ball rolling. One of the sessions that we've just concluded now on how we get this going was discussing how we get small-scale repositories where there may be one archivist and a dog operating 3 days a week. What's in it for them? I think we clearly have to look at some way in which they can, in essence, simply press export on their catalogue and have somebody else do the work for them, be that the National Archives running a hosting service or whatever. Once we've got a sufficient number of people involved, I think there'll be a critical point. People who've looked at the evolution of Wikipedia might know better than me how we actually measure that critical point, but there will be a point at which it's worth everybody's while getting involved.
Well, why have this data? You might have loads and loads of data, but what's the point if nobody uses it? So I think it brings a new challenge into it in terms of why do people want to access this information and how do we link it up and make it available in an appropriate way?
Seamless access, flexible delivery, personalisation, and I think if we can put those three things together, there is a very exciting future.